Alright. So, we're going to do the same this evening as we've done the last few weeks. I will recite the piece, and then I'll give a little bit of a background on it, and then go through it again, talking about it, and then we will conclude and open it up, and we'll have an open conversation where everybody contributes their own wisdom and so forth. So, with no further ado, Sandokai, the identity of sameness and difference. The mind of the great sage of India was intimately conveyed from west to east. Among human beings there are wise ones and fools. Within the way there is no northern or southern patriarch. The subtle source is clear and bright. The tributary streams flow through the darkness. To be attached to things is illusion. To encounter the absolute is not yet enlightenment. Each and all the subjective and objective spheres are related and at the same time independent. Related, yet working differently, though each keeps its own place. Form makes the character and appearance different. Sound distinguishes comfort and discomfort. The dark makes all words one. The bright distinguishes good from bad phrases. The four elements return to their nature as a child to its mother. Fire is hot, wind moves, water is wet, earth hard. Eyes see, ears hear, nose smells, tongue tastes the salt and sour. Each is independent of the other. Cause and effect must return to the great reality, like leaves that come from the same root. The words high and low are used relatively. Within light there is darkness, but do not try to understand that darkness. Within darkness there is light, but do not look for that light. Light and darkness are a pair, like the foot before and the foot after in walking. Each has its own intrinsic value and is related to everything else in function and position. Ordinary life fits the absolute as a box and its lid. The absolute works together with the relative like two arrows meeting in mid-air. Reading words, you should grasp the great reality. Do not judge by any standards. If you do not see the way, you do not see it, even as you walk on it. When you walk the way, it is not near, it is not far. If you are deluded, you are mountains and rivers away from it. I respectfully say to those who wish to be enlightened, do not waste your time by night or day. So, Sandokai, this is a poem written by Shitu. So Dick, thank you for doing your homework there and sharing with us in your back screen. He was one of the disciples of the sixth patriarch, Huineng. Huineng in turn was, there's a long story where he was awakened with a line from the Diamond Sutra. He heard somebody saying, awaken the mind, not dwelling on anything. He went off to a monastery. There were two competing poems on the wall of the monastery. One about a mirror, polishing a mirror. The other one where there is no mirror stand. That was Huineng's, that he was transmitted and the other guy wasn't. Led to a division, the northern and the southern schools, which is a very famous division in Zen, with focus respectively on sudden enlightenment and gradual enlightenment. Which and they're different facets of the same practice. So this poem comes out of that distinction, and it can be read as a commentary on the existence of those two schools and the divisions, the northern and the southern schools in China. But it is a broader poem about practice and reality in general. And it's from that broader perspective I'll look at it this evening. So first, the title. The translation is not a great translation, unfortunately. Benjamin will probably correct me later with my own version of the translation, but this is Chinese from 1500 years ago. Sandokai. There are three words in there. San means three, but as in one, two, many. It can also mean lots in this vernacular. Do can mean oneness or singleness or a coming together. And Kai, the translation I've read is it's shaking hands. It's the act of shaking hands. So without getting hung up on the particulars there, the thing to take away is you have the one and the many, and they are in intimate relationship. It's not that they are the same thing. It's not actually identity. But the one and the many are in intimate relationship and really can't be separated. So the mind of the great sage of India, obviously Buddha. There's this thing in Zen of mind-to-mind transmission, which is a teacher recognizes in the student the self-realization, awakening, and how would you go? Nomine nomine, domini patri, figli e spiritu sancto, or something like that, right? So it's this transmission, recognition, and what is transmitted? It's and what does that really mean? It's very subtle. But the mind, it's big mind, it's great mind. It's not the logical, rational thinking mind. It is the awakened mind. Among human beings, there are wise ones and fools, but in the way there's no northern or southern patriarch. So the fool on the hill, the fool in the European court, was the wisest person around. The fool was actually the only person who was able to speak truth to power. The fool was a very skillful speaker, often a strong philosopher, great humor. Who's a fool and who's wise? So there's this. Don't get stuck on ideas. The subtle source, in a way, it's the same thing as the mind. What is it that all this comes from? What is it that flows into the dark and the light, the one and the many, the relative and the absolute? Where does it come from? So I could spend a couple of weeks talking about this, but I'll skip some of this because there's same themes recur. The dark makes all words one, the brightness distinguishes good and bad phrases. This is a fairly clear articulation of the general theme. The darkness is a reference to the absolute, the unconditioned, the unborn, and the light refers to the relative, the manifest, the born, the faces I see on the screen in front of me, in the room in front of me, the cushions, the chairs, stuff, the voices you hear, deciphering voices. So these are two sides of the same coin. When we are in relationship on the side of darkness, things aren't distinguished as separate. It's not to say they don't exist, but they don't pop out as separate things. Two hands, right hand and left hand, they're part of the same body. They don't see themselves. I don't, when I'm in relationship with my hands, I really don't experience them as different. They're in the same body. They look after each other. So this is within the darkness, and within the light, everything is discrete. We put up walls between stuff. The four elements, earth, fire, wind, and water. These generally refer to, if you like, the subtle body. They are not an attempt to describe everything being made up of these concrete things of solid earth and liquid water, and you stir three of one and two of the other and stir it up and you've made something. They are talking of inherent properties. Earth is a sense of solidity. Water is a sense of fluidity. So you've got these four elements which characterize properties, describe characteristics of things. And they're all, how does it say? They all, so I'll do the next ones first again. I see, ears, hear. That's more concrete. These are the senses and the objects of senses. So you've got the subtle and then you've got the more concrete. But in each case, they return to their nature. The four elements, their nature is the fifth element, really. It's space, aka sky, aka emptiness. So the deeper nature of everything is that they're one taste, ikagata, one taste. And it's not that things don't come out differently, but there is a lack of separation at that deep level. And the fact that they come out differently is described precisely in fire is hot, wind moves, water is wet, earth hard. And then the senses and the sense experiences, again, all independent. Each of these is independent. And yet, cause and effect. What is cause? What is effect? There can be no cause until we experience the effect, because by definition a cause isn't a cause until it's caused an effect. That sounds like a word game, but if you really slow down, it's not just a word game. The cause and effect are inter-are. You can't have one without the other. So they're not separate. None of these things are truly separate. So this identity of sameness and difference is the sameness is this one taste. The sameness is the darkness. The sameness is seeing with soft vision, seeing in non-duality, seeing with the heart. The difference is turning the light on and shining it brightly so you can see the edges of stuff. This identity or this non-separation is that these are the same thing. In a sense, these are different ways of experiencing reality, but in a deeper sense, to really experience reality is to hold both of these at the same time, to not separate either the darkness or the light, to not separate out the emptiness or the solidity and separateness of things, but to experience things as it is, as Shunryu Suzuki would say. Within darkness, so within light there is darkness, but do not try to understand the darkness. You can't understand this stuff. It's not intellectual. It's not in the head. Within darkness there is light, but do not look for the light. You can't see where it comes out, because there's just no edges there. You can't see how this emerges from, how the born emerges from the unborn, how the manifest emerges from the unmanifest, because it doesn't. They're together. It's the way it is. They're a pair, like the foot before and the foot behind in walking. The foot before and the foot behind. If you're walking, which is in front, which is behind? It's constantly changing, and then they're side by side, right? This is to give a sense of how these are just so intimately related to each other. They can't be separated. Each has its own intrinsic value, sure, otherwise I wouldn't be talking about them as separate things, and we wouldn't have them passed out in the title as sameness and different, darkness and light, so forth. Each has its own intrinsic value, and it's related to everything else in function and position. Ordinary life fits the absolute as a box in its lid. The relative fits the absolute, the manifest fits the unmanifest, etc., as a box in its lid. So, I don't know how to do this without using the same word twice, but the case of the box and the lid of the box, put the hinges on and put them together, and you've got a box. Without the container and the case and the lid that fit together perfectly, you don't have a box. You can't have the manifest without the unmanifest. You can't have the unmanifest without the manifest. They are the box and the lid. They just fit together. To think of it otherwise is nonsense. Hence the idea of Zen sickness. Somebody is used to walking around in the world and seeing stuff and stubbing their toe and saying, ouch. And then they have this enlightening experience of something. Oh, kumbaya, everything's one, how glorious. And the Zen master will say, go away and let that ripen, because that's not right. You've gone from one extreme to the other extreme, and it's an extreme, and it's not balanced, and it's not really a reflection. It's not really seeing the world as it is. Absolute works together with the relative like two arrows meeting in midair. Medieval Chinese story, two brilliant archers both simultaneously try and kill each other with arrows. They're so darn good that their arrows hit each other, point to point. Same basic idea. If you do not see the way, you do not see it even as you walk on it. We are all walking the way all the time. This is a poem that has obviously Taoist overtures to it as well. It was written at a time when Taoism and Buddhism were sharing ideas and sharing spaces. So the way becomes the way of the Buddha is actually the way of the Tao as well. If you do not see the way, you do not see it even as you walk on it. We are all walking it all the time. We just have to open our eyes. And that's not these eyes, that's these eyes. When you walk the way, it is not near, it is not far. Near and far are meaningless ideas. Walking the way is moving beyond being bounded by time and space. Recognizing time and space are simply constructs within which, respectively, events and stuff show up. We create events. And we've got to have time for events to make any sense at all. So there's this thing, time, that shows up as the container for these events we create. Similarly, space shows up when we start creating things. We've got to have a way in which these things can relate to each other, and that happens in space. So it's not near, it's not far. That's kind of, the world doesn't work that way. If you are deluded, you're mountains and rivers away from it. It's that snapping point that I talk of in many different ways, where the metal puzzle with the two pieces that pop apart, or the images that are out of focus, that are like the detailed patterns where there's something that pops out when you drop your eyes out of focus, or the black and white where you see the faces of the vase. If you don't see something, it's just not there, and then suddenly it's there. Self-evident closing line. I respectfully say to those who wish to be enlightened, do not waste your time by night or day, called this great matter. What can be more important than finding true peace? What can be more important than helping all beings find true peace? That's the promise of this practice, that's the promise of this poem.